I got a really cool guest on today and his career spanned so many different things. I think if you said 20 years ago, hey, it's going to take him over here to wrestling, you'd probably say, how is that possible? My dude, Freddie Prinze Jr., how are you, my man?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. Now, people are going, wait, why are we talking about Freddie Prinze Jr. wrestling? But you have a new podcast out called Wrestling with Freddie, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so before I kind of jump into how you got it, man, I went to WrestleMania 1.
That's amazing.
Dude, so it was Madison Square Garden. It was Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Rowdy Piper and Paul Orndorff, and Muhammad Ali was the referee. How fucking cool is that? Right?
That's right, man. Yeah. Ali and my dad were actually friends back in the 70s, and Ali used to spar with him and whip his ass all the time.
Really? Oh, my God.
Yeah, man. My dad
do you have footage of that?
On the Tonight Show. Oh, yeah, man. My dad did a mean impression of him, and Johnny Carson asked my dad to host the show. To this day, he's the youngest person to ever host the Tonight Show.
Wow.
And my dad had George Foreman on as a guest, and they reenacted Zaire, and my dad was Ali, and Foreman was Foreman, and Foreman let my dad knock him out. We actually have a towel with Ali's blood on it that says either June 1st or June 21st, 1975, Ali's blood. My dad got beat up so much, he met my godfather, who was Bob Wall, who just passed away. And Bob was the guy that Bruce sought out when Bruce Lee came to America. So Bob introduced him to Gene LaBelle and Chuck Norris and Pat Johnson and all these like legends, right? And my dad heard he was the guy that trained like all the Hollywood guys to be tough guys, like Steve McQueen and James Garner. And so my dad said, you got to teach me how to fight. And my godfather taught him the left hook or a check hook, really. Right. And they were in Ali's house and they were fooling around. And my dad caught Ali with like this baby hook, right? But the couch was behind Ali, so it made Ali trip and fall. And his nose got bloody. And my dad ran to his bathroom, grabbed a towel, wiped the blood off, jumped in his 75 Stingray and hauled ass to his house. While he's driving home, Ali's calling the house, talking to my mom, saying, I'm going to kill that boy. You tell that boy I'm going to kill him when he gets home. My dad had the towel framed like a war medal on crushed purple velvet with a mahogany frame and a little brass plaque that says Ali's blood. I think it's June 21st, 1975. My mom still has it to this day. She says I can have it when she's dead. That's her exact quote.
That's unbelievable, man.
Yeah, dude.
Incredible. That is wild. I love that.
My dad charmed a lot of people that took care of me when I was a young kid. So
that's
I was
really
very
cool,
lucky.
man.
Yeah.
Really cool. And look, I'm going to hit we kind of segue into that. I want to hit your podcast here in a little while. But you talk about your dad. Obviously, your dad, right, he took his own life when you were just a little kid.
Yeah,
how
10
did
months old.
How did it affect you? And, you talk obviously glowingly here, like you have this relationship with your dad. How did you have a relationship, with your dad as you were growing up? Like, how did it all affect you?
Well, to start your question, it was horrible. How I dealt with it, in the beginning, I didn't. It was something that was constant pressure and this crushing weight. And how I have the relationship with him I have now, as strange as that sounds to say, when you're a kid and you lose a parent at a young age, and anyone will relate to this, your knowledge of them is based on stealing memories of others. That's it. Like you're just stealing, you're looking for anything. You're asking more questions than most kids. It makes you grow up a little bit faster. It probably stunts your growth in other ways. But you ask a lot of questions, you get a lot of adult stories. I mean, you got to understand, I was talking to guys like Richard Pryor, Paul Mooney, all these like legends to get stories about my dad, because Richard discovered my father. And they had that huge falling out because Pam Grier fell in love with my dad instead of Richard. And Richard, they had the same manager, and he's like, you got to pick. And the manager picked my dad, and Richard was pissed off. And, when my dad died, he was still pissed at him. So it was, it was a crazy time back then, but it definitely, it shaped me into the man I am, but it definitely didn't help me in any. That's a horrible thing for any kid to have to go through. And when they're famous, it just makes it more, you have to just deal with it a lot sooner. So you have to grow up a little bit quicker.
When you talk to Richard Pryor, is he like, I don't want to talk about him, or is he like, all right, I'll show this kid some compassion?
he looked at me and he said, boy, your father was a motherfucker, but he was a funny motherfucker. And I loved him. And it made me cry. Like I broke down in tears. I was probably like 21, 22, probably about the same age as my dad when he died.
Wow.
And he broke it down for me. Paul Mooney I met when I was 12, and he just talked to me like I was a 40-year-old man. Like he didn't pull any punches. He used any language he felt like using, and I just had to sit there and take it. It was me and Chris Titus, and Titus introduced me to him. And I used to hang out in the clubs when I was like 12 years old because my dad opened the Improv. So Bud would just let me hang out with all these like celebrities doing cocaine in the bathroom and all these people talking trash and talking the best smack I've ever heard on stage. And I would sit there with a spiral notebook and write their jokes down and then write how loud the audience laughed. And I had like 14 or 15 Mead notebooks filled in like 4 years because I would just spend all my time there. But all those guys helped me learn who my dad was in a more honest and realistic way than my family, who would just go, oh, he was lovely. He was wonderful.
Right.
But no faults, no flaws. And those men were able to tell me the flaws, which helps you get a more three-dimensional picture of him.
And you said it helped you grow up obviously a lot faster. But there's two ways you can go. You can grow up and you can be bitter and angry about it. You can grow up and say, I'm going to be more well-rounded. Is that a decision you made, or like, did you have to kind of practice that, or did it just come naturally?
It's definitely practice. I mean, I've said this before, but I credit it through martial arts. Bruce Lee said martial arts is the physical expression of what we love and hate most about ourselves, but lack the vocabulary to communicate. And so when I was young, my godfather took the same approach with me, and he was very disciplined and very strict and made me work really, really hard. But that was the main thing that helped me through all that, especially through puberty. And then once puberty was done and like my testosterone was in check, like my body was used to becoming a young man, then it got much easier to deal with. And I was ready for the next set of challenges that would come, which was when I came to Hollywood. And then all of a sudden had to deal with constant like public questions about him in my early 20s. Right. And I was just grateful for the experience that I had from my godfather to prepare me that best I could, because it wasn't always easy.
Wow. Who's of all those comedians who sat in there, who's the funniest motherfucker that got the best laugh?
I mean, I watched Richard Pryor in a wheelchair break the Comedy Store with full-on MS, go up there. And the whole crowd was completely tense because you never want to see your heroes suck. You don't want to see Joe Namath as a ram. Like that's not the vision that you have, right? You want to see him in his prime. You want to see him, killing it. And so the crowd was really nervous. They almost didn't want to see him perform. His assistant had to put the microphone in a little stand, and he's shaking, and he starts off, and his voice is real weak. And he says, can I cuss on this or no?
Fuck yeah.
Okay. It was Richard Pryor. So
you're talking to me too. Shit.
Okay, all right. So he says, I was at a multiple sclerosis function with Annette Funicello. And his voice is shaky like that. And the crowd's like, oh no, like we can't watch our hero. Like we can't watch him up here and suffer. And then he gets this little twinkle in his eye and he goes, and she sucked my dick. And he did 5 minutes on what a blowjob from Annette Funicello was like. And I won't do it justice, so I'm not going to recreate the joke for you. That's unfair to him. He's not here to beat my ass for it. But the crowd, we were all hook, line, and sinker. Like he brought us in with weakness and then just killed us with strength. And then after the joke was over, he just told the one joke, and then his helper came up and he said, I guess that's all I can do now. And they rolled him up, and everybody stood up and cheered longer than his set lasted.
Wow.
I'll never forget that. He literally broke the room because he had us in such a vulnerable place, and he knew it. The son of a bitch knew it. And then he killed everybody. It was such a genius. He's the best ever. Everyone agrees to that.
Incredible. That's incredible. Why'd you decide to get in the showbiz?
My grandfather was not a fan of my dad's.
Right. And
he had cancer when I was 16 years old and was on hospice care. And he asked me to come in, or my grandmother said, your grandpa wants to talk to you. And I went into his bedroom, and we knew he didn't have much longer, and we had all kind of like made our peace. And he grabbed my hand. He looked like Popeye the Sailor Man. This guy had giant tattoos of anchors on his forearms. He was in the Navy. He had 3 hairs on his head. It was great with his hands, smoked a pipe. Like, he was just a cool dude. And he grabbed my hand, and he still had so much friggin' strength in it. And he said, "Freddie, did you clean your room today?" I'm 16 years old. I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm so proud of you." And at 16, I didn't know. I'm like, all right. Like, I didn't know he was saying, like, for who you are and for who I think you're going to be, right? And then in the same breath, he says, "You know, your father really fucked things up, and it's up to you to fix it." Wow. And an hour later, he was dead.
Whoa.
Dead. And I'm literally was just like, oh, God, thanks for that backpack.
Right? Oh, my God.
Pressure going on being a loser sophomore in high school. Like, now I get to deal with this shit too. So as soon as I graduated, or the last day of school, I didn't even stay to put on the gown and cap or any of that stuff. I got in my car. LA was closer than New York, drove to LA and got started.
Wow. Hey, that is a lot of weight, man. Oh my God.
Yeah, it sucked, but it was my life. So it was what it was.
But there's 2 ways you can go. That could either cave you because of the weight, or you could say, no, I'm going to step up. Now I'm stronger. How did you do that? How did it become the latter for you? That's incredible.
These moments happen to us more often than I think we like to admit, the sort of breakable moments. I just think as each one passes, we're a little bit stronger and better prepared. But it's an involuntary response for me based on the way I was raised and the disciplines that Bob Wolf preached to me nonstop. I mean, I know this quote by heart, but I hated hearing it every time he said it. He would say, "Freddie, you're in control of 2 things, your actions and your reactions to the actions of others. And anyone who tells you different is full of shit." And he said that to me every single day, every time I went to complain to him. There was no sympathy. There was no empathy. There was just, here is the solution to your problems. And if you can't accept it, it's not going to change. And so at an early age, I practiced that pretty well. Like, even in my 20s, I was pretty good at it. By the time I was in my 30s, I was a master of it. And now I just try to teach it to my kids.
That's incredible.
But that's what saved me. Otherwise, I would have ended up like anybody else in this business who isn't prepared for fame and the pressures that come with that. And there's so many friggin' stories out there. And no matter how many of them we know, we keep falling into those traps. So it has to be based on how you're raised and the type of programming you have.
Yeah. For anybody out there, showbiz is about who can withstand getting rejected more than everybody else.
Yeah, and it's a multi-million-dollar business, so the stakes are always so high for these people. It's a lot of pressure, and you have to be able to look at it from the outside and then make your moves. Because if you just sort of, I'm a sweet kid from the Midwest and I'm jumping into it, you are dead. You are dead before your feet hit the street. Like, you have to go in there prepared, and you can't just be the prettiest person in your school. You can't just be the buffest guy on the swim team. Like, you have to be mentally tough to survive out here, or it just chews you up.
Yeah, no doubt. No, and that's the thing. Like, look, I'm a different career, obviously, with sports broadcasting. But
close enough,
11 years. That shit, 11 years, I was making $9,400 a year living in New York City.
That's not living, brother. That wasn't living.
Was terrible.
That was surviving.
That was surviving. Deciding which bill was not going to get paid that month. But it's the early days. I'm like, shit, I just have to outlast everybody. I've got to be the last motherfucker standing and try and find a full-time job every week, all those weeks, over and over and over. Luckily for me, I ran into my first day on the job. I ran into another guy in the Giant locker room who nobody talked to for years. He was a goofy guy with bad teeth and a speech impediment.
Oh, God.
He was drafted to replace Lawrence Taylor, and Lawrence is still on the team. So no one really talked to him. And that dude was Michael Strahan. And people don't realize, like, the first 4 years of his career, man, he struggled a lot. Year 5, he blew it up. But he felt bad for me because of how much I was struggling. And I didn't have enough money to take myself from New York City to Giant Stadium every day. So he would drive me back into New York every single day.
Come on, man.
For 7 years. So I owe Strahan like $28,000 in Lincoln Tunnel fare.
I've heard so many people speak about this man the way you speak about him. Yeah. And I only know him a little bit. Like, when he was out here in LA in the beginning, he asked me to teach him to surf, and then it never worked out.
Yeah, because we moved to Hermosa. from New
That
York.
must have been when
Yeah.
it was. That must have been when it was.
Yep.
And it never worked out because I was working and then he was working. But I remember everybody, I would tell that story and people were like, dude, he's the nicest guy. He'll legit go. And I was like, I think we might. And we almost did like 2 or 3 different times. We just couldn't make our schedules fit. But I've always heard people just hold that guy in the highest regard. And I had a great experience with him.
You know, and it was great for the two of us because I got to really learn football from a different perspective because
Yeah.
his greatness was his preparation. So he'd sit there and again, he was my ride everywhere and he would look at film over and over and over and over. And he's like, look over here. Look at John Runyon's foot in this plane. I'm like, what the fuck are you looking at?
John Runyon,
Yeah.
dude.
I'm like, what are you looking at? I've got a date coming up here. You're killing me because you got to drive me to the date. But he would really show me about these tiny little things. My question to you is kind of who was that person for you when you came out here and you were able to lean on and help you in the early days kind of scrounge up some victories?
Peter Falk was very instrumental.
Wow. Columbo?
Yeah, man.
That's cool.
I made an independent film with him. And for whatever reason, I think it was because of my father, he took a real shine to me and put an arm around me. And it was like being in film school. And he would talk to me about the old Cassavetes days and how it was a brotherhood back then. And it wasn't a competition between that. And I was just like, God damn, it's not like that now. And so he just really helped me focus on the art, the work. He talked about the difference between skill and talent. And just really showed me a different way to prepare, a different way to look inside myself, because I wasn't able to apply life experience before Peter. I was just able to fake it and create stuff. And I was young and green at it, but I could do it to a at least an above average level. And then he helped me be so much more deliberate in my choices and help my planning and preparation so much more. And really focusing on like 2 scenes and then looking at how every other scene you do in the movie affects those 2 scenes. And the reason he picked 2 was so that you would just get 2 different perspectives of it and then start applying that philosophy to everything. But he was like having an acting coach for 2.5, 3 months out there, and then was kind enough to stay in touch with me after the movie and still, communicate. He would say he was proud of me when he saw me booking jobs. He go, I didn't see the movie, but I'm glad you got it. You know what I mean? It was like that kind of thing. But he wasn't the demo. So he was very instrumental. Brian Denny, he was another guy only on set though. We didn't maintain a relationship after the movie, but during the filming, he really showed me what it was to be like a leading man and when to fight for what you believe in, even if the director thinks they want something different. He's like, this is on you. This movie's not on him. It's on you. So if you believe in a choice, that's the choice you do, regardless of what he says. And my brain was just so not wired for that. Because like I said, I grew up in martial arts. Like what your professor or director tells you, you do, you execute it because something's wrong. And Brian's philosophy was like, what you did wasn't wrong. It was just different than what he wanted. But what he wanted isn't important because it's not his face on the poster. And I was just like, wow. Oh, yeah, I never even thought about that. And I started looking back at other jobs that I had done mentally, not watching them, but mentally, and remembering all these moments where I didn't fight. And I was like, oh, okay, I got it now. And so from that moment, I really changed as an actor.
What you said earlier also, Peter Falk showed you the difference between skill and talent. Sum that up for me. Sum that lesson up for us.
Sure. Talent's what brings you to Los Angeles. Skill is what gets you work for 25 years. Talent is having an ability to be a storyteller and communicate, right? The old saying is storytellers cut no wood. Skill is using that talent, not all at the same time, knowing when to hold it back, knowing when to go for it, being deliberate in the choices when you break down a scene. What's the obstacle? What's your goal? And what are the ways you're going to work around that obstacle? That's how every scene is developed and crafted, and every actor approaches it in their own way, but to that effect. And so skill and talent is, everyone's talented, but until you have a master who teaches you how to sharpen that blade, it's just a bat. You know what I mean? And you can still do damage with a bat, but if you sharpen it, forget about it, man. Like now you have a weapon and you can compete at a higher level. So
man, I love that.
Yeah, that was probably the best way for me to describe it, but it wasn't the way he described it. I just don't have the vocabulary he had.